Yes, a very nice breakfast, very juicy breakfast there being prepared by Chef Ali. Just before we go back there, we need to wrap up our news review this morning with Charles Kipulei, Charles Munyui and Sandra Ochola. And we just want to take a look at one more headline, and this is on page 10 of the Daily Nation. Jubilee to get lion's share of nominees in both houses. Uhuru's party has a chance to increase its dominance in the legislature by 10 and 6 seats respectively, 10 in the Senate, 6 in the National Assembly. Remember, Jubilee already has the majority in both houses. Now, the first paragraph reads, the Jubilee Party will have the most nominated members of Parliament, 16, after it attained the majority in both the National Assembly and the Senate in the general election. Of course, Parliament is convening 30 days before. So, this is interesting because, Sandra, we're already looking at an already too powerful majority side of the National Assembly. 165 members elected on the Jubilee Party ticket. Add 6 now, that's 171. Remember, we're not even looking at the affiliate parties, KANU, Maendeleo Chap Chap. So Jubilee could very easily get to 180 members, and that's over half of the number in the National Assembly. Isn't there a risk with that?
Well,
we feel like we're going back to the single party era.
I know. I had that conversation, I think, 2 or 3 days ago, and someone said that given the history of how our parliament operates, if you have majority, then there's a high chance that you're able to change a lot of things, and most times, often not for the good of the country, and often not for the good of the people. But my thinking is, first is that what Jubilee has attained, it has attained on merit in terms of how it did its campaign, the strategies it got, and that is reflective of the number of people and the kind of people it has taken to Parliament. And secondly, by law, it is required to nominate more people for it to meet a particular threshold for it to undertake its activities in Parliament. And another issue of discussion is that at this particular point in time, there is a sense that things are not the same for MPs, things are not the same for those elected officials in Parliament, where you can underperform or perform in a particular way and still be guaranteed of your seat moving forward. So I believe there are certain checks and balances. Of course, now we cannot overrule the fact that in certain instances, Jubilee might have the upper hand in passing certain legislation or undertaking certain activities that much to the chagrin of the public. But then again, my feeling is perhaps we need to move with the confidence that we have checks and balances from a public perspective and even within the judiciary, so that if they make a decision that is contrary to the constitution, then that matter can be taken for judicial review elsewhere.
Yet we can only operate on hope. What if they decide to actually use their numbers negatively? Probably not negatively, but looking at their numbers now, they're only short of about 40 or so to get to the 2/3, which is a very critical number. If you can reach that threshold, 2/3, you could even change the constitution.
Yeah, and I think there is nothing wrong with changing the constitution, Fred, as long as you're changing the constitution for good. And numbers are good. Numbers are good if you use them positively. And I want to believe the reason as to why even Jubilee wanted the numbers is because they want to pass legislation that require to further their agenda within the shortest time possible, and to be able to whip their people, so that on a matter that needs to be addressed urgently, it can be addressed. And I think more importantly, like Sandra has said, the fact that these numbers are there, it is telling that the whole aspect. And if you remember, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta was talking about uniting the country, and one of the ways he thought, or he saw fit to help unite the country, is to have members of the National Assembly and the Senate across the country from one party, thinking from the same position, so that people stop thinking that this is a cake that is being shared between URP or Kalenjins, if you want, and TNA, Kikuyu. If you have NASA in northeastern, NASA in western, NASA in coast, I mean Jubilee in coast, Jubilee in western, Jubilee in Nairobi, Jubilee all over the country, then it looks uniform, and the thinking will be the same. Then whoever is in Kisii and someone else in Mombasa and you on a Jubilee ticket, then the understanding and the thinking is these are people who are thinking on the same path, and they are not intimidating the center so that they can be able to get a bigger cake, a piece of cake as it were. So numbers are good. I want to believe it will be used for good. And if you look at the pieces of legislation, unfortunately, when it comes to members of parliament, especially the National Assembly, you look at legislation that favors them as individuals, they come together. Even that majority is easily achieved. And I'll give an example.
With their own benefits and issues to do with their salaries, maybe. But there's some issues when the party leader has a certain interest.
Yes.
Of course, they have to pass.
Exactly.
They have to rubber stamp it, and it will be much easier for the executive now to get legislation to Parliament.
But I think there is also the aspect of public participation even when it comes to legislation, and I think that is an area our Kenyans need to get educated on, because any piece of legislation that is going through due process in Parliament must come to us for also as Kenyans who give these individuals jobs. In fact, we have just given them a bit of our powers as provided by Article 1 of the Constitution that says all this power belongs to us, whether it's legislative, executive or judicial. So bottom line, if there is a piece of legislation that even the president wants, or the leader as it were, and it's not sitting very well with us, you can rest assured Kenyans will see it and they will talk about it, and I don't see anybody going in that direction. And I think Uhuru is not famed for doing such.
Well, it could be easy talking about President Uhuru Kenyatta, but any other person in that position could use those numbers in any way they want. And of course, the other very interesting headline, mixing my odds, the other very interesting headline on that same page to do with the same numbers is the comment there by opposition MPs. They're saying we are not scared of Jubilee's numbers. This is
the numbers are not
Ugonja MP Opio Wandai. But surely these numbers are scary.
They are not
for an opposition that has less than 100.
You know, the reality for opposition is that when they say, for those who are for this opinion say aye and the nays, then you'll know that these numbers matter. So I think numbers matter a lot. But looking at what the new architecture of our politics, and especially in terms of party representation in Parliament, I do not want to look at it as a dangerous thing, because it is a reflection of the will of the people.
Yes.
So this is what Kenyans have decided, and really I want to point out what my colleague said about the unity issue. When people look at that Parliament, they'll see an MP from across every region sitting on that ruling side of government and even in opposition. So that's a good thing going forward. But of course there is the risk of Parliament going rogue because of numbers. Well, that could be a tragedy of democracy, but as you know all the time, they only close ranks when it's an interest, like when they want to increase their salaries and self-regulate. But on matters that have to do with policy and the quality of legislations, I think with a solid manifesto that Jubilee had, then it is an opportunity for them to use these numbers to transform this manifesto into now development outputs for Kenyans. And that is something that we're really looking for. And that now behooves the president to provide good leadership and show Kenyans that these numbers and our leadership is a safe pair of hands. The country is in a safe pair of hands. But going forward, I wouldn't want to look at these numbers as really something to worry about. Even if there are many, we can say it's called the tyrant of numbers, but I want to look at it, even if it is dictatorship, it is democratic dictatorship. It is the will of the people being shown in an overwhelming manner. So the only challenge is for the president to provide leadership, which I think President Uhuru Kenyatta is a safe pair of hands for this country at the moment. And therefore, going forward, the only challenge is that opposition need to put their act together, because they're already losing numbers as we speak right now. There are members even from Eastern Kenya who are saying now we think it's better for us to cross the floor and go where the power is. Where power is.
But of course, the other big discussion is about, yes, the numbers are there. The president is a safe pair of hands, as Bwana Kipulei says. But the leadership within Parliament will matter a lot. Because who are you going to give these numbers to actually work with? Who is the leader of majority? Who you're giving this role, now giving you the soldiers, go and as a general and lead them to war?
It is prudent to appreciate the fact that the leader of government business, who is the leader of the majority, is holding brief for the leadership of the party, as it were. Is holding brief for the president, his team, the agenda of the ruling party, the party that has the majority, is what he's taking. There is not his personal opinion, as it were. And I think the moment we understand that, then we will know. Even the aspect of whipping is about bringing all of us together and basically taking that agenda out there and informing our people on how we are proceeding with these things. Now, the assumption that is always there is that the leader of majority is there to just say all these manner of things about the opposition. That is not really the case.
That is what we've seen in the Parliament.
It is a role that he plays very well, but I think the bigger aspect of it is that he is there in Parliament holding brief for the...
So it does matter the kind of individual you choose.
It does matter, especially in matters of cohesion, because I think that is the biggest topic now moving forward. Jubilee's win is not now the issue. It is about this country seeing itself as one, so that even political competition does not bring out that feeling.
For example, do you think the leader of majority in the 11th Parliament is fit for that role, where probably the president will be seeking even to appeal to the other side of the political divide?
Duale is. I think it was, at that time, it was necessary for that kind of Duale to be there. But moving forward, I want to believe you'll see a different kind of Duale, because now circumstances are totally different. But then, any other kind of Duale would not have worked for us. He did execute his mandate properly, because it required of him to do so at that time, because that is the kind of opposition that he was dealing with at the time.
And even as we wrap up this news review, then the opposition has an even bigger burden, and probably they'll need an even better general to lead the much subdued battalion of opposition MPs. Picking the leader of minority will be also quite key in determining the shape of this parliament.
Yeah, and I'm thinking perhaps now they'll need the opposite of they'll need a Duale.
They'll need a Duale on that side.
They'll need a Duale on that side, someone who so to speak, is aggressive, is in tune with what the needs of the party, is in tune with the requirements of parliament, and is also sober at the same time, someone who's able to articulate their issues and also negotiate, given that they're in a position where they'll need to talk more than show more bravado. They'll need to have good negotiation skills if their issues are to get there. Yeah.
Well, it will be interesting to see who is doing that.
Speaking of Honorable Duale, I think one of the biggest assets in politics, especially in relations to when you are dealing with the relationship between now the big men and their generals, is loyalty. And that is one thing that you need when you are thinking of a leader of majority, or even a leader of minority for that case. You need someone who has proven loyalty. And I think for Duale, people may have perceptions about him, but I think from where I sit, I think he has delivered for the party. Because now he needs to be a strong general to marshal those forces and really provide strong leadership in parliament. And going forward, what opposition need to do at this time is identify a strong leader, but it's a transitional period for them. So the challenge is the person who's going to be identified will most likely be seen as because the most tragic thing, apart from the Senate where the Senator Wetangula now sits, the rest of the principals really never got to a position to hold public office, either in parliament or even in council of governors. But in parliament, specifically the National Assembly, the person who shall be picked to lead opposition shall essentially be the person who has been blessed to take over the mantle. So it really has to be a calculated act, because we are not only looking at a leader in parliament, but a leader who's now going to take over the mantle, because in my view, I think a changeover is happening in this leadership, especially in opposition, because most of them are at the twilight of their political careers. Which is why these
if you were to propose to the opposition on their choice of a leader minority, any person comes to mind?
Well, without mentioning names, I want to describe the character of that leader. I think first of all they need someone who is vibrant, young, and a person who has a longer political shelf life. Do not bring someone who may lose the election next who is now saying on his third term, fourth term, and people are saying same old. They need to bring in a new leader who's going to really fit into the new architecture of parliament. Looking at parliament right now the way it is, there is a huge component of there are huge gains for women, huge gains for the youth. I'm not saying they get just a greenhorn, but someone at least who can really capture the aspirations of the majority, not just of parliament but of Kenyans, so that people will have an aspirational perspective of this person and say, this person can take us somewhere.
Yes.
What do you think of Ken Okoth?
Yes, because now I'm looking for names. Do you think the kind of character that Kipkulei has described, do you see that kind of person in the opposition benches? You know, we're still learning who got elected where, I'm sure. Not all the names are clear.
I don't know. I think it's going to be very, very hard for them because, again, the structure is such that this is more of a coalition. It's not individual political parties.
But this time around in Parliament, I think they're being considered as individuals because it's no longer called, and NASA is not a proper coalition, so it has to be ODM with the second biggest party in Parliament.
Yeah, I don't know. The Kasarani gentleman, what do you call him, Wakili? Kajwang. TJ Kajwang minus the whistle. If only he can drop the whistle, because he's sensible, he's articulate.
Yes.
Yeah, Kajwang can do that, can do that perfectly.
Okay.
But he also needs to drop the theatrics, because that's a serious position again.
He needs to come above that kind of politics.
Exactly.
Yes. Any other names? You had mentioned Ken Okoth.
Yes, I'd mentioned Ken Okoth. I think he's a sober, bright, vibrant young man, and a fighter when it's required of him. But then I also think they have a good number of choices. I think one thing that we must not assume is that just because the opposition doesn't have the numbers, just because the opposition is a minority, that it might not have attracted quality legislators as well. I think it has very good people in there, and time will tell. We wait for the announcement. We'll give them that leeway to make decisions, the decisions they want based on the kind of people they have.
Okay. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your considered opinions this morning on News Review. We've come to the end. Thank you so much, Sandra Ochola, Charles Munyui, and Charles Kipkulei, our panelists this morning. My name is Fred Ndumuli, leaving studio. Remember, Chef Ali is in the house, is still cooking up some breakfast, and the hashtag to use up until 9 a.m. is Power Breakfast. Good morning.